In this section, we'll learn how to create a gradient and then how to control and manipulate that gradient with the gradient tool. I'm just going to start by creating a square, a rectangle with my rectangle tool. And it's currently set to a red fill and a black stroke. So I'm just going to draw a big box here. And I'll highlight that fill. Now to start the process, I do have some pre-made gradients. If I look down here, I can choose a gradient, okay? But likely it's not what I want, so I'm just going to undo that and show you how you can generate a gradient once you've drawn an object. Again, my fill is selected. I go up to my color palette, open that up, and you can see we have fill and stroke, so just make sure that you're on the fill. And go up to this pull down menu where it says solid color, and you actually have some choices here. So linear gradient goes along a single line, and radial gradient is circular. Okay, so let me just try linear gradient to start with. Now it will start with two colors, if you will. And I can just highlight these little icons here and actually change the color. And I can highlight this one over here and change the other color. I can also slide these back and forth to change the ramp where it occurs. You can see it updating live in my drawing here, or I can extend it to the very edge, if you will. And these can be moved around. Okay, fairly simple. But the idea here is that I highlight the little icon here, and that's the color that will change. So where I see it's yellow right now, it's going to change, in this case, to a pink. Okay. Now I can actually make this a more complex gradient by adding some more of these little icons. And I simply do it by clicking. You can see how my cursor changes there? By clicking just below the color bar. And that adds a new one. Now by default it just adopts the current color, but I can completely go and change that to something else. And now I have sort of a rainbow effect, if you will. And I can go in, and again I can, choose some colors here. And make some changes. And I can even move these around, and I can cross over. So, I can get very complex in my gradient, if you will. Now if I want to get rid of some of these, it's very simple. I click them and drag them downwards. And boom, there they go. Now it's the same thing for the radial gradient. I can actually convert this on the fly while it's selected. And affect the nature of that. So if I want to add a color in the middle here, let's say I want to add that bright green. Suddenly I've got blue radiating to bright green, radiating to this pink. And if I want to pull that pink in a little tighter, I can do it like this. And that's how we establish the gradient using the color palette. So I'm just going to get rid of that middle one there again, and I'll collapse this for a second. Now with my drawing highlighted, with my fill highlighted, I will go to the Gradient Transform tool, which is right under the Free Transform tool. And you get something that looks like this. Now I can take this and I can distort that by grabbing that icon. I can actually move the center point of that gradient as well. I can also rotate it. Now this is not that perceptible because it's a radial gradient, but it is rotating. And again, I can distort the size like this, or like this, which actually stretches it. This scales it, this distorts it, and this rotates it. It's actually more obvious now that I've flattened that out into an oval shape. But these are basically how you can control the gradient within the area of the fill. So again, I can move its center point, no problem. Distort its proportions, just do a resize or rotate. And that is known as the Gradient Transform tool. So between that and my color palette, I have full control over gradients. Again, I can actually add another color here and introduce that on the fly. And maybe I want to rotate that. Stretch it out, scale it up, and again I have full control over my gradient in combination with the color palette and the gradient transform tool. And that's how we work with gradients.